What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as Hamhawks42 on the internet, and this is another exciting episode of Overthinking MTG. Today we're doing things a little bit differently because I actually got a request from a fan, my boy Panda the Paladin, who is a Twitch streamer. I highly recommend you check him out, twitch.tv/. Panda the Paladin, all spelled out exactly like you'd imagine. And yeah, he puts on a great stream over there. Also, just super cool dude. And he and I got to start talking about Magic while he was selling me on Dark Souls, actually, of all things. And yeah, and so we got talking, and he requested that I cover a particular card called it's Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. Now, this is one that I actually personally haven't used. It came out. It looks like it was originally printed in Time Spiral, followed shortly by, well, so it was in a From the Vaults and then Iconic Masters. So, but Time Spiral, which falls into that beautiful window when I wasn't playing the game, so I get to discover it all over again for the first time. All right, so let me go ahead and read this guy. I've seen the card reference before. I know Teferi because he's just all over. He's been reprinted a number of times. He's also been a major character in the story since the frickin' beginning. That dude has been on Dominaria messing stuff up since he was a what is it, incorrigible pupil or impetuous student, I think was the name of the card. Anyway, so Time Mage, he messes with stuff. He's around forever. He's a planeswalker. You know him. You love him. So this particular edition of Teferi, which is also just before I even get past his first name, Teferi is how that seems to be pronounced. And I got to admit, when I came back into the game, I was very surprised, and I had no clue who people were talking about when I first heard Teferi, because I always pronounced that, in my head anyway, Teferi. I could have swore this dude's name was Teferi for the longest time, and I don't even know that I've ever said that before, and here I am admitting to it on a podcast. Okay, so Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir, or the Mage of Zhalfir. Anyway, he's a legendary creature, human wizard, so this is presumably before his spark ignited. He costs 2 generic and 3 blue, so he's mono blue, and you got to commit to that blue. He's a human wizard. He's a 3/4 with converted mana cost 5 with flash. Creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield have flash. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime he or she could cast a sorcery. Ooh, mm, mm. That is vicious. And actually, this guy, well, it's interesting actually to see this version of him because he's very, very good. However, he's not splashable. You're committed to mono blue. He does have 3 blue devotion, however, so that's worth noting. But at the same time, like, he's got a lot of cool abilities. Him having flash on himself is pretty rad, and then being able to flash in absolutely any creature is great. Compared to modern day 3 fairy, as he's known, which is Teferi Time Reveler, this guy seems stupid balanced. I love him because he has that trickery, but he's a 3/4 for 5. Okay, so you got to commit to the shenanigans because his stat line isn't that great. Like, he's good, but he's not amazing. He's also a wizard. Wizard synergies. Holy crap, that's a tribe that can do all kinds of ridiculous nonsense, and he fits right in. It's perfect. I mean, hell, there are wizards that allow you to just counter spells as activated abilities. So let's go ahead and toss him in the mix too. Why not? And then you can give all your wizards flash too. So you have all those crazy tap counter, tap bounce ridiculum that's going on, and you can throw it in during your opponent's turn. Not to mention cards like Faceless One that get that's power and toughness are equal to the number of wizards you control. Being able to throw wizards at instant speed is pretty awesome. And I'm also getting a little distracted there because the acoustic panels that I just set up behind me are apparently falling off my wall. So that's pretty rad. All right. Anyway, so Teferi or Teferi or Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. Oh, and then of course he has some flavor text too. But just all in all, creatures having flash, holy crap! Being able to flash in anything with an ETB trigger, and in blue there's so much of that, it's redonkulous. Having him in your command zone, so having him as the commander of a mono blue deck, you're communicating to your opponents exactly what the game plan is. Meanwhile, if he's in your 99 or if he's in a 60 card deck, you can have him in your hand and surprise your opponent by throwing it down. And late in the game, if you have 5, and then you have something else, another creature with a quality enter the battlefield trigger um, that you can flash in. You can do some fun stuff with that. Yeah, all in all, I'm impressed. Dude, Panda, good call. This thing rules. Yeah, and he feels better than Three Fairy. So you have some instant speed shenanigans, chicanery, if you will, when he's in your hand. However, you do have to spend 5 up front in order to take advantage of it. So there's that. Meanwhile, Three Fairy that we know and either love or truly despise in standard right now, he's a planeswalker that costs a 1 blue, 1 white, and a generic. So he's a planeswalker for 3. He comes in with 4 loyalty, um, and he has the static ability that your opponents cannot play spells when your opponents can only play spells at times they could play a sorcery. So it's his secondary ability here. Yeah, because that's disgusting. I mean, I like it, but it's disgusting. Being able to completely shut down all of your opponent's instant speed everything's. Oh my goodness. It's not everything, because activated abilities are still available to them. But all instant speed spells are just immediately shut off. Also, there's one detail in the rules that I think is worth noting here. When you have two rules that oppose each other, and one says you can do a thing and the other says you can't do a thing, can't wins. So if I have something like a Vidalcan Ori down that allows me to play any card with as though it had flash, and you play Teferi, I better have a way to stop you from getting him on the field, because if he resolves, all of a sudden my Vidalcan Ori, it's useless. It's just sitting there until somebody removes Teferi from the board. And whoever it is, it's going to be on their turn at sorcery speed. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and it's not even that they can only cast spells on their turn. That's really important to note, because certain cards like Fires of Invention limit you to casting spells on your turn. That said, you can cast spells like counter spells as long as it's on your turn. So if your opponent is trying to disrupt your action, you can you can play the stack game with them, but only on your turn. Meanwhile, Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir here, he prevents anything from going on the stack. So you're not able to play spells if there's something on the stack. So if there's no responding to anything, you can only play spells when you have priority and the stack is empty. And I know it is easy to not think that that's a big deal. It's easy to think, I'll just wait till my turn. It's okay. That's when I was going to play my creatures anyway. It's fine. Until you actually get into that moment when you have the mana and you have the frickin' card, and it's usually removal or a counter spell, and it's just sitting there and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's so upsetting to not have that window and not have that option. And that's why Three Fairy is dominating standard right now, because that static ability is insanely popular. Not to mention, I mean, that card alone like completely eliminates whole other strategies. I mean, Simic Flash comes to mind. It's completely useless if Teferi's on the board. And then on top of it, Three Fairy gives you the +1 ability of being able to cast all your stuff at instant speed. And I think it's only sorceries in that case. So you're limited to the spell slinging kind of motif. You can't drop enchantments or creatures. Meanwhile, Zhalfir here is built around creatures and being able to instant speed creatures into play, including himself. Yeah, all in all, that's really cool. Anytime a card interacts with my hand and gives a card in my hand or a card in my library a different characteristic, I'm down. I'm very interested. You're talking to a dude who has 4 copies of Arcane Adaptation for that exact reason. I love being able to tinker with cards in my graveyard, cards in my hand, cards in my library. Love it. I'm all about that stuff, because that's where some really weird nonsense. I was about to say degenerate nonsense, but it's not even degenerate. It's perfectly fine, because in this case, you can do a lot of fun stuff. I have no doubt there's some genuinely degenerate stuff you could do with this guy. Actually, Uro comes to mind. Being able to flash Uro in is pretty redonkulous. Although in that case, you can't escape him at instant speed, so that's worth noting, because that's an ability and you're not casting it. Yeah, you don't get flash in that case. At least I don't think so. I'll have to double check how escape is worded. Anyway, holy cow. Yeah, Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. Very cool. The other thing to note actually with this version of Teferi versus others is it's a creature. That's really worth noting because a lot of other versions of Teferi are planeswalkers, obviously, because his spark ignites, and that's kind of a big deal. But the fact that it's a creature, it allows a couple things. It allows you to do reanimation tricks. It allows you to create copies and tokens to as defense. It allows you to put, give them protection from different potential threats. So those are all options. You can hit it with a God's Willing or something of that nature in order to keep it alive. Also, Lazotep plating that gives everything hexproof, Starlit Mantle, those kinds of effects that allow you to project creatures. Well, you can use those to keep this guy and his effects on the field. The flip side of that, however, is he is susceptible to targeted removal spells and creature-based board wipes. So something like Wrath of God, Shatter the Sky, Day of Judgment, those all hit it. Other ones, well, Ritual of Soot wouldn't hit him in this case, but Wrath of Kaya, that's another one that's floating around quite a bit these days. Um, what is it? Merciless Eviction, that's one that is delightful in just how nasty it is. And that one targeting creatures can hit this guy. So anyway, there are a lot of vulnerabilities that come with having a body, but there are also, I don't know, you get some other flexibility. If you're willing to be creative, you can do some cool stuff with it. So it does have flavor text. To save this plane, he must forsake all others. Huh. Interesting. And that actually, I find myself contemplating the duty of a planeswalker. So if you are aware of all these different planes of existence, if you're aware of all the strife, all the needs, all of the iniquities in the multiverse, how do you prioritize who to help? That's another thing that I find interesting with whenever you're dealing with multiverses, whenever you're dealing with interplanar travel, especially when you get into the whole theory that there are infinite universes and infinite realities and all possibilities have occurred on one of them. Because then you have the very real question: is saving this person meaningful? Because the moment if I'm a hero and I want to save the world from a threat, if I know that the world that I'm saving is only one finite piece of a much larger picture, and I know that there are infinite worlds, and in an infinite number of them I succeed, and in an infinite number of them I fail, and I'm merely one of them. It really it makes you wonder, is it really worth it? I think in the end I would come to the conclusion that it is, and I would need to fight for those around me, and I would need to fight to save even one life, because even one life, even one plane, even one one creature, one life, one possibility that I can impact, I need to do what I can to do it. And so I can appreciate the idea here, the idea that Teferi is focused on Dominaria. He is focused on his home. He is focused on his plane. And he will do whatever it takes to save the people around him, the people and the places he loves and he calls home. He will do what it takes. I can appreciate that. I can respect that. The idea that he needs to forsake all the others, though, that doesn't sit well. That's a concern. So I find myself wanting to read more context around what the story was happening in, what was going on in Time Spiral. I know there was some interesting weirdness with the multiverse going on there. I'm definitely curious, and I'd love to understand what he was thinking. If doing everything you can to save your plane, if you know that you're going to be dooming others, is that the right move? There's kind of that Vulcan mentality of the goods of the many outweigh the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that to a point, and that's where things get weird, things get sticky, and that's why moral conundrums as we know them today exist. Anyway, good stuff. There are no doubt rulings. Yes, here they are. So we have a couple rulings. The first one is from 2007. If you have Teferi on the battlefield and there's a split-second spell on the stack, such as Sudden Death, also note Croson Grip, you can't suspend creatures until after the split-second spell resolves. Whoa. All right. So you have Teferi on the battlefield. There's a split second spell on the stack. Okay, sudden death is chilling on the stack. You can't suspend creatures until after the split second spell resolves, but it's just for suspend. Oh, is that specifically? I believe that's specifically calling out suspend. That the ruling is if something says you can't do something, like split second says you cannot put anything on the stack, that supersedes Teferi's ability of giving creatures flash. I believe that that's, if I'm interpreting that correctly, that's what that's getting to. All right, next up is from 2017. Teferi's last ability means that in order for an opponent to cast a spell, it must be that opponent's turn during a main phase, and the stack must be empty. This is true even if the player doesn't have a sorcery they are able to cast, or if a rule or effect allows a sorcery to be cast at another time. Ooh, interesting. Again, okay, so sorcery speed, or anytime you could cast a sorcery, in this case is referring to the times that the game would allow you to cast sorceries. Again, like I was saying earlier, if I have a Vidalcan Orrery that would allow me to cast sorceries at instant speed, theoretically, doesn't matter. They're back to being sorcery speed. Okay, cool. Well, so in November 2017, somebody backed me up on that, and I appreciate it. Thank you. If you have Teferi on the battlefield, you may exile creature cards in your hand with suspend anytime you could cast an instant. Ooh, okay. So suspending counts in the same way that casting a creature counts. So you give your suspend creatures have flash as well, even if you suspend them. Okay, cool. If a spell or ability lets an opponent cast a card as part of its effects, such as suspend and rebound, that opponent can't cast that card since the currently resolving ability is still on the stack. This is true even if that card is an instant. Ooh, ouch. Okay, so if a card resolving allows you to cast a spell, you don't get to do it. Ah, oh my goodness. That's so nasty. Although I didn't realize that the spell resolving still counted as being on the stack. That's fascinating. I guess I had always assumed that when a spell resolved, it was no longer on the stack. I've never had an occasion to know that, but here we go. And that's an instance where it would come into play. Huh. Interesting stuff. Dude, Panda, thank you for pointing this out. Again, that is Panda the Paladin. He's over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Panda the Paladin. And I'm currently trying to talk him into investing a little bit in his arena collection so we can do some collaborative streams. Here's hoping, right? If you're curious who the heck I am, that's Hamhocks42. Well, my real name is Graham. But I'm also known as Hamhocks42 on the internet, twitch.tv/Hamhocks42. And if you would also like to see a particular card be addressed on Overthinking MTG, the best way to get it to me is hit me up on Discord. That link is in the show descriptions, along with the link to my Twitch as well as Panda's. So yeah, come check us out. Thank you so much. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will catch you next time.